In 2025 in particular, I feel like attention is such a scarce resource. So I think that the role of the writer is to hold your attention and sustain it. Hi, my name's Diana Reid. My new book, Signs of Damage, is out now. It was released this week at the beginning of March with Ultimo Press. Signs of Damage, I think of it as a summer noir. So means terrible things happening in idyllic settings. So it is about a woman called Cass who is suffering something that modern medicine struggles to explain. And it's about how the people around her impose their own explanations. In particular, they all start to wonder whether the source of Cass's troubles lies in the events of a disastrous family holiday they all took together in the south of France 15 years ago. I wanted to write something that was a bit more structurally complex than anything I'd done before. So I wanted to write a book that was a bit more thriller-like. It's not fully a thriller because I don't think it has all the genre conventions. It's still probably more in the intersection between literary fiction and thriller. But I wanted to write something that felt like a puzzle for the reader. And I was also at the same time interested in this question of what is the difference between understanding someone and trying to explain them. So I was interested in that, I think, very human compulsion to try to make other people make sense to us, and in the process often perhaps inadvertently simplify them or reduce them. And the situation I chose for dramatizing that was looking at trauma and how we look at people who have suffered and we try to understand the effect that suffering has had on them, or conversely, when we see people who are behaving in unusual ways, often the way we make sense of it is we try to think about whether something terrible happened to them in their past that can explain why they are the way they are now. This book's probably a departure in a few ways. So my first book was called Love and Virtue, and that was a campus novel about sex, power, and consent set at a university in Sydney. And then my second novel was called Seeing Other People. That was also set in Sydney. It was a summer romance about two sisters who fall in love with the same woman. So Signs of Damage is my first book that's not set in Sydney, where I'm from. It is, there are certain scenes that take place in Sydney, but the bulk of it is set in the south of France. And then it's also the first time I've not written about people who are so close to me in age. So the Signs of Damage moves through lots of different perspectives, and some of them are teenagers and then some of them are men in their 70s. So it's a bit more, I guess it's broader in its scope than anything I've written before. I like books that make the world seem more complicated than I thought it was at the start. So I think, I like books that challenge assumptions, or sometimes even in the process of challenging them, make me realize that I had an assumption that I wasn't even aware of. I think that's also the way I try to write. So I think the starting point for me is often a question, or perhaps something that I see as taken for granted in society that I think maybe is worth questioning, or I think that, I think that there are grey areas that are underexplored, which I suppose is quite a philosophical sort of framework. I really try not to think too much about my audience, which is probably I think it sounds counterintuitive, but I just think that the thing that everybody wants to read is something that feels true. And I think that the only true thing you can write is whatever is interesting to you. And I think that if you try to reverse engineer it and you think, who is my reader and what does that person want? And then you write to that, then I just think readers can smell that, it feels manufactured. I think my audience probably has changed, but I think that would be a result of me just growing as a writer and maybe, kind of broadening my scope rather than me actively seeking out a different audience. I think it's just been a bit more of an organic process. I guess it goes to what I was saying before about how always I'm always interested in complicating things. I sort of, yeah, I try not to write didactically. So I don't think there's like a lesson that I want the reader to take away, but I think I would like them to feel challenged, I guess. So I would like them to feel like they were wrong about some of the characters and hopefully to feel like invigorated by being wrong. Yeah, I do write full time. So I don't obviously just write novels. I also do freelance writing for magazines and newspapers and stuff. And I do a bit of screenwriting work as well. But yeah, I'm very lucky that I don't have like an office that I have to go to or anything. It's, yeah, I write full time. I would work probably half the week at home and then the other half in libraries or cafes. I live in London, so there are many beautiful libraries to choose from. And yeah, I have a local library and then I also have one called the London Library, which I is like a subscription library, which is great because lots of other writers work there, so you get a bit of a sense of community. And then in terms of like the nitty-gritty, it's pretty boring. I just when I'm drafting, I like give myself a number of words that I have to write every day, and I just don't let myself stop until I've done it. And some days you can finish it quite quickly, and then some days, you have a slow start and you procrastinate, and then you have to push on into the evening. My lucky tip question is, what do you do to relax? That's a good question. I think, well, when I was living in Sydney, I used to swim a lot, but I don't. I've moved to London now, so there's less opportunity for that. But what I find really relaxing is cooking, and that is because I think it's to do with the nature of writing, which is like it can be quite a frustrating occupation. I mean, I'm so lucky to do it and I love it, but the day to day can be frustrating because you often like spend a whole day writing 1,000 words that you just know you'll delete in the morning because they're all hopeless. So I love cooking because I can like make something through to completion and then enjoy it each time. So yeah, it's like a creative act that is actually fulfilling. I think that in 2025 in particular, I feel like attention is such a like scarce resource. So I think that the role of the writer is to hold your attention and sustain it. And then I also think it is I think that so much of the content we consume is like so fast and it doesn't allow much space for nuance. So I think that also the role of writing in particular as a medium is like as far as possible to delve into nuances that other mediums don't have the time or the space to explore. Oh, I like reading literary fiction. I think that's partly because I'm so easily influenced as a writer. Like I sort of inadvertently copy what I'm reading. So I end up having to read the kind of books I want to write. But yeah, so I I like literary fiction that's also a bit plotty. So I think my poster boy would be like Ian McEwan. But I've read some great contemporary books recently. I loved The Hypocrite by Joe Hamya. And I also loved Emily Maguire's latest book, Rapture, which is a historical novel. Anything literary that's got a bit of plot is my sweet spot. The books that really got me into reading, like I'm just a child of my generation, were the Harry Potter books. I don't think I'll ever be as excited about a fictional world as I was by Hogwarts. And then the book that got me into writing was actually a nonfiction book. It was Helen Garner's The First Stone. And that was because I wrote my first book after I'd left university. And I think I was so used to university style writing where you like start with an argument or a thesis. And I had lots of questions about sex and power and consent on campus, but I didn't have a coherent argument. And then I read The First Stone, which is a book that's very much written from a place of doubt. And it made me realize that books, the books start with a question rather than starting with an answer. And so I think that sort of encouraged me to get going. What's next for me? I'm working on another novel, which is still early stages. So I'm not super articulate about it yet, but it will be different again from what I've written before. Great. Thank you.